Wakanda Forever is a beautiful transitioning film. Hi, Incluvie. This is Andrew here with Incluvie, here to do a 5-minute review of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So, I like to think of Black Panther Wakanda Forever as a transition film, a very intentional transition film. We're going from the first movie that got the excitement of the Black Panther, right? Like, introduced him. He was introduced in an early movie, but gave him his first full movie, right? That was the first movie, the introduction. We had a Killmonger come in, be an external threat that penetrated and became an internal threat, right? Very cool film. This one's a transition, right? Transition from that to Wakanda as a larger force in the Marvel universe, as a Black Panther as a mantle, as opposed to riding on the success of one particular version, right? And so when I say the Black Panther is a transition film, we have to obviously acknowledge that unfortunately Chadwick Boseman died. T'Challa in universe died because Chadwick Boseman out of universe died, right? And so the film does a great job of giving us time to mourn. It tackles the subject right away in a very thoughtful way, and then kind of transitioning to what happens now with Wakanda, with the mantle of Black Panther. What happens now? How do we move forward, right?
Show them who we are.
I think it does a great job of doing so with deference, right? We never feel like T'Challa's legacy is erased or pushed to the side, right? It's done in a way that it flows naturally and respectfully into a mantle transition. And I think it's a great model for Marvel with the mantle transitions they need to do going forward, right? Because these actors are human beings who have other thoughts and ideas and lives and families, right? And they may literally in real life transition out of the role, like to go do other things. And so I think a great job of mantle transition happens in Wakanda Forever, where Shuri not only takes on the mantle in a very natural way, but she does it as Shuri. She doesn't try to emulate T'Challa and take his bravado and more fight heavy style, if you will. Of course, he was brilliant too, but take his fight heavy style. Shuri makes sure to use what Shuri's good at, intellect, right? Thinking. Shuri analyzes her enemies and decides on an appropriate plan of action, right? Shuri also relies, I think, a little bit more on the rest of Wakanda, right? Like she helps to make the Avenging Angels. She meets Ironheart. We get to introduce Ironheart in the movie. And from the offset, she, yes, sees herself as like leading them into a charge. But from the very beginning of the movie, we see a collaborative effort to battle the enemies, the Talakans and Namor specifically, right? We see like a collaborative effort. Everybody's all in, right? With Shuri leading the charge. Whereas in the first movie, I think we saw more of a solo hero who used the rest of Wakanda at the very end to, make it to where it's him and Killmonger one-on-one, right? And so I like that. I like how we expanded the world. We got to see Wakanda as more than just a throne room and a lab, right? We saw people on the everyday streets. We saw how devastating war can be on the streets of Wakanda. We also saw that Wakanda is a real place, right? Real within the Marvel universe in the sense that nothing is guaranteed, right? It was very shocking and hard to see our warriors who we, have come to see as almost infallible being attacked from the outside and seeing all the damage done to Wakanda and seeing all the destruction and even ultimately death, right? And so it humanized Wakanda from, yes, it's this awesome, super tech, super futuristic place, but it's also vulnerable, just like any other place that we don't protect what we have, right? So I love the humanizing and expansion of Wakanda. I love that we did this intercultural affair thing where we added in the Telecons, right? Representing indigenous cultures and Mexican cultures, right? Especially indigenous cultures in Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula. I love the idea that this was intercultural and there were like moments together between these two cultures that didn't necessarily revolve around the traditional narrative, which would be like a Euro-based country, right? Whether that's in concept or literally based on it, meeting the person of color country, right, from some other place that's outside of Europe. I like that this was two countries that actually do have a storied history, right? Black and indigenous people do have a storied history. And I like that this was kind of touching on that. You can tell that someone with some knowledge about these things was making this movie when they decided to make Namor and put him with an indigenous Yucatan Peninsula kind of heritage, if you will. So I really liked that. I thought that was really well done. I thought that Namor was a great villain. I think that he was complicated enough and hurt enough that, and within the context of war, that he didn't come off evil, right? He came off like the antagonistic force, but not evil, and his motives were understandable, right? Similar to how some people felt about Killmonger, I felt this character was a little more relatable as far as not being a super villain, quote unquote, but being more an antagonistic force with an opposing viewpoint. I felt that was a little more seen in this one, if that makes sense. And then finally, just no movie is perfect, right? And I did think there were moments where the film might have chose a different direction. I think one of those things for me is just the way it feels like the status quo kind of got reset. We transitioned to Shuri being a new Black Panther, but then at the end we get, T'Challa Jr., which is a nice surprise, right? That Nakia and him had a son that he knew he was dying, so he kept him away. It's interesting, but it also feels like a reset of the status quo, right? Like, why do we need to reset it to where there be another man, T'Challa Jr., to eventually take the mantle? And even right now, while he can't take it, we see it M'Baku apparently is going to be the new king, which has implications that maybe he will be a Black Panther, if not the new Black Panther. And, it felt a little bit like, a reset of the status quo. So we did something courageous, made sure the Black Panther, and then we reset the status quo. But again, this could be all to set up the Young Avengers as far as T'Challa Jr. is concerned. And again, we could also just be seeing that Shuri will be out of Wakanda and maybe can be used as a Black Panther, if you will, in a larger context where she's not bound just for issues related to Wakanda. So I like that idea too. So I'm hoping that that's kind of the transition we're doing and we're not just resetting the status quo. But overall, cinematography is beautiful. Ryan Coogler's story is great. It's hard to even tell where there were holes in the script that he might have had to refilm. There are obvious things like obviously she probably met Killmonger and not her mother or T'Challa because there was no filming of T'Challa as an ancestor since his death was so unexpected. But I think that was a nice pivot, right? Like I love the way the story found a natural way to pivot to her meeting Killmonger in that ancestral plane as opposed to T'Challa, and it didn't feel cheap or like that we had to just be like, well, T'Challa's not here, so we had to do something, right? I think that was a great job. And I like the idea of Shuri being her own Black Panther. That was my favorite part of the movie. There were some questionable battle choices, like why warriors who are strongest on land would take a ship to the middle of the sea where their water-based enemies are strongest and let themselves essentially be marooned and outnumbered. But I'm not the filmmaker, so there you go. But again, Black Panther overall is an amazing transition film, right? It's transitioning us from a Black Panther that was centered around an amazing actor to Wakanda and Black Panther being greater than one person, being mantles and home, right? And so I like seeing Wakanda almost take on the same relevance as Asgard for the Marvel Universe, right? Like it's a place with a lot of story and history, and it's home to a lot of people. It's not just, a one-off place for a story, right? So I think in that way, Wakanda Forever is a beautiful transitioning film. It's transitioning to somewhere we just don't know yet. We won't know until we see the next film. So I'll be just like you. I'll be looking out for the answer. I'm Andrew Tanner. This is Incluvie 5-minute review. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. See you next time.